Hey, what's up? I'm DJ Sixsmith. You're watching Sit Down. Ken Luce here, brand new book, The Hidden Girl from Simon Schuster. What's going on, man? How are you?
All right. Thank you very much for having me. Doing well.
You got it. So you have camped out in this whole sci-fi world, short story world. Why don't you tell people about the latest book and how it all came together?
Sure. So this is the book, The Hidden Girl and Other Stories. It came out from Simon Schuster. And I have published over 150 short stories by this point. And I had one previous collection called The Paper Menagerie and Other Stories. And this is the second one. It basically collects some of my newer stories. And the overall theme is about how do we remain human in the face of cataclysmic change.
I mean, that's certainly something that applies to what's going on today. So what were some of the deeper layers that you really thought about with what's going on in your stories?
No kidding. I mean, when I wrote these stories, I wasn't thinking specifically of pandemics, even though a lot of other writers were exploring the concept. What I try to focus on really is the way technology is changing the way we define what it means to be human, and how do we react to that. So one example would be the way technology is changing the definition of what it means to know something. Nowadays, when we say we know something, what we really mean is we have an idea of where to look it up, because looking up information has become so effortless and so frictionless. We often think that we know something, but in fact, all we know is how to look it up. I was a practicing lawyer for many years, and this is very obvious in the legal world, where you can't actually draft anything from scratch anymore. What you do is you take a form and then you modify it. So when you're moving around between firms or between jobs, if you can't take the forms with you, you sort of feel like you've lost a huge part of your brain. Literally, you can't even do your job. And I wanted to explore this idea of our externalization of our knowledge, of our sense of identity, the way we put so much of it out into the electronic world, the digital world, and where the logical destination for that trend is. A lot of the stories explore this concept of the singularity, which is the idea that we literally become digital beings with most of our mental processes in the digital realm. And what does that mean? How do you remain human in a world like that?
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating, especially with social media. You put a version of yourself out there. It's mostly the best version of what's going on in your life. And now's the perfect time where it's like, there's not really a ton to share, except if you're doing new stuff. So what do you think is most difficult for people when they are putting out that certain image? Do you think it reveals more about them in terms of what's going on in their life? Or like, what piques your curiosity about just this whole digital identity in general?
It really is interesting. I mean, what I think is interesting about the digital self-presentation is that it's really causing all of us to rethink the whole idea of having a single unitary identity. In the digital realm, I think all of us are very comfortable with the idea that we present different identities to different groups. The way, and this is a very old cliche, the way you present yourself on LinkedIn is very different from Facebook, from Twitter, from Instagram. You have multiple different selves. The issue is maybe we have always been like that. We've always code switched between different communities. The way your friends from grade school know you is very different from the way folks in college know you, which is very different from the way people at your first job know you. And the digital identity concept just makes all that so much more clear, brings so much of that to the surface. You really can see yourself being locked into this image you're projecting to the world through different digital channels. And then it becomes more difficult over time to reconcile yourself, which one actually is you. And if maybe that's even the wrong question, maybe the whole concept of having a unitary self is the wrong way to think about it. And it's the multitude of identities that really, and the way we mediate and try to balance between them all, that leads us to have this sense of self.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And you make a great point about how we do this in real life. And, you hit on something before where it's like, we know how to find things now. We don't necessarily know things. So do you think the good outweighs the bad? It feels like we know a lot just about a few different, or a lot of different things, a little bit about a lot of different things. And like for you as a lawyer, like you went all in on certain things. So how do you kind of weigh the pros and the cons there?
Well, it's kind of a difficult question, right? I mean, I don't think it's a simple matter of whether it's all good or bad. I think technology ultimately is just a force multiplier for human nature. So it amplifies the capacity for all of us to do good, as well as the capacity to do evil. In the same way that any, in the old days before the internet, it was very difficult for somebody with very outrageous, dangerous, radical ideas to make anything happen. It's very hard for them to find like-minded individuals to become a movement. And nowadays, radicalization is a very significant problem on the internet, because people can find these extremist views and find like-minded individuals to feel the sense of community.